All right, y'all. Eric here. Welcome to Rant and Review. In this video, we're going to be talking about The Acolyte, Season 1, Episode 3, otherwise titled Destiny. So careful for spoilers. If you're not caught up with The Acolyte this season, you've been warned. Let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so if you watched my review last week, you will know that I enjoyed the first two episodes of The Acolyte. I was singing its praises. I was very excited for the series. So this week's episode, I was really looking forward to it. Came home, got myself a pizza. We were sitting down, really hype to jump into the continuation from episode 2, where they were going to confront this Wookiee Jedi. And I was like, we're going to see some cool stuff. Because, I've tried to stay away from getting spoiled on social media. So I don't want to know anything about the upcoming episodes. I want to just experience them as they come out. And oh my gosh, they pumped the brakes on this one. They took a turn off the exit, off the highway. I don't know what happened with this episode, to be completely honest. Just it really felt like just a complete stop to the momentum we had from the first two. But I think that we needed this episode, or at least the elements of this story, to add into what's happening with Osha, May, and Saul. Like it was necessary, but I don't know if we needed the whole 45 minutes to be this. I feel like there should have been something else going on, personally. Let's just kind of dive into this. Okay, so there's this coven of witches on a planet. I think it was Dronak, I think is the name. I didn't take any notes. I'm recording this right after we got done watching it. There's a coven of witches that I believe is a sect. It's like an offshoot of the is it Dathomir witch sect that we met? I guess connected to the Ahsoka stuff. It feels like it. They do feel different in a way, but very similar. And so we have these two women who are, I think, one of them is obviously like the leader. The other is I guess a partner with her. It wasn't made very clear to me. I mean, okay, so I guess they're supposed to be lesbian space witches, I think is what we were supposed to get from them. But it feels like the whole entire coven was sort of like just a family, if that makes any sense. Because we have Osha and May there as kids. This is 16 years ago. And it just feels like they're all sort of part of this group raising the kids. So I don't know if they were... It's hard to talk about this. I don't know if the actual intention was fully realized, if that makes any sense. If they were supposed to be like a lesbian couple raising these two kids, it felt more like a partnership, a really close partnership than anything else. I didn't get any sort of chemistry or anything like that between the two characters of Coral and Anasia. I had to look her name up, Anasia. There's just not a lot of chemistry between these two characters. I will say Coral being, I believe this is the same race as Darth Maul, so Zabrak. Is that right? Zabrak? Again, casual Star Wars fan. I don't know all the lore, but I believe that she was supposed to be the same race as Darth Maul, which that's kind of cool. Anyway, they're living on this world. They're witches. They're hiding from the Jedi. They're hiding from the Republic because they know they're not supposed to be practicing this stuff anymore. And it feels like there's a lot of other things happening. And so they're raising these two children outside of that so they can basically turn them into like these powerful witch beings. I'm guessing that's what it was supposed to be. So this is what they're doing. And you kind of see a lot of interactions between May and Osha. And I'm going to be honest, and this is no disrespect to them, but the children acting in this just wasn't very good for me personally. I never felt convinced by either of their acting for any length of time. I mean, there were moments here and there, but it wasn't very convincing. So I just didn't really like it that much. I would have much rather like been jumping back and forth between the story that we started last week and this to give us a little juxtaposition. But we didn't. We stuck to our guns in this backstory episode. Anasia was fine. I thought she was okay. Coral was okay. We didn't really like learn much else about the rest of the witches. Look, I love fantasy. I love magic. So I was totally on board with this idea of these force witches existing separate from the Jedi and facing off against the Jedi. And I was hoping, my fingers were crossed that we were going to get some sort of battle between them. And unless there's another episode where we're going to jump back to this, which I don't know if we will, unless they're going to go back and do that, we just didn't really get anything. It's going to be like, basically, May caused the fire, the Jedi, unalive the witches. And I don't know. It felt like a lot of that was unclear in the episode. And trust me, I try to like piece together the blocks, but I didn't totally get that part. So for me, didn't really work. I will say the visual effects were really strong. I enjoyed that. I thought that the using the Force was really cool. It went back to the more spiritual elements of the Force, which I think a lot of people were over the midichlorians, and so they didn't really dive into that here. It was more about a thread combining everyone together. Very Wheel of Time for reference there, and I thought that was fine. So all of that, that's just kind of my take on this whole environment. And you have the Jedi there, the 4 Jedi that May is trying to chase down. 2 of them she's already taken out, so we know that they're gone. It was good to see Carrie Ann return, even if it was only for a short time. But yeah, these are the Jedi that she's going after. So we're getting a lot of context for the motivations of these characters. And I think that is very important. Again, I think there's stuff in this episode that's going to matter later on. But I don't know, for me, if it was important enough to dedicate a whole episode to this. So I'm thinking about it. I'm like, did we need an entire episode to convey some of this stuff, especially with what I consider to be, from my opinion, like subpar acting from the kids, where I just don't think the emotion was conveyed well. All the adult actors did fine. It was just the kids did not convey emotion that well. And that's going to be a totally subjective thing. Maybe it worked for you. Maybe you thought that it was really good. It did not work for me. And we can fight about it in the comments, I guess. Okay. So what do we find out about May and Osha here? So May and Osha were apparently immaculately concepted, similar to, I guess, the story of Anakin and how the Force, Anakin came from the Force. And I don't know. There's arguments about that, but I'm just assuming, based on being a casual Star Wars fan, that that's what we're supposed to think, is that Anakin came from the Force. So I guess we're to assume that Anasia created May and Osha from the Force, and then Coral carried them to term. I'm guessing that's what we're talking about here. Okay. So the thing we have here is we have what I feel like could be like Star Wars 0, because what this is the most literal light side, dark side story you could possibly get in Star Wars. You have twins. One of them is going down the path of being a Sith. The other one wants to be a Jedi, and it's light and dark facing off against each other. I don't know if that's super exciting to me as a viewer. I don't know what I wanted from the story, but I really didn't see it going that direction. So I think that's a ding against it for me. Maybe it'll become more interesting. Maybe there's more to that we're going to get to at a certain point, but I don't know for sure if that's where we're going to go with it. And I would love to see deeper, meaningful dialogue from those characters now that we know this is the situation in the series, because now that they've planted the seed, we have to let it grow, see where it's going to go. So there it is. It's very literal. One of the other things we're thinking is, what if they were clones? What if they were clones of Anasia? Basically, she was cloning herself, but then I don't think that makes a lot of sense. So either it's a force children or clone children. Take your pick. I can't imagine it would be anything other than that. And so Osha wants to leave with the Jedi. May doesn't want Osha to leave, so she decides to burn down the temple. And so there we have it. That is the storyline that was being teased with Saul and the Jedi in the first 2 episodes. Now, in Acolyte fashion, they are answering questions. So I have to give them credit for that. They're definitely answering questions about stuff while adding new questions to be answered. And that is one of my biggest praises of the series, is that they have managed to do that, even in this episode that I didn't think was particularly good. It might be, in my honest opinion, one of the more lackluster episodes of Star Wars television across the shows. And I think you're going to see a lot of people, I believe you're going to see a lot of people saying that. but they're going to go really hard against it. I have a feeling there's going to be channels that are going to go really hard against it for a lot of reasons, which I'll touch on here in a second. But overall, I did not really enjoy watching this episode as a thing separate from like the binge model. Like if this episode were in a binge model where you can watch this and then immediately go to the next one, I don't think it would stick out for me as being as weak of an episode as it is. So I think if this were paired, like if you're watching it in a binge, you're not going to notice the more weaker elements because it's not going to matter. But week to week, definitely it stuck out to me that way. And with that being said, let me go ahead and give my score for this episode. I kind of struggle with this a little bit because I do realize that these scores are probably going to be used to sort of batter the show a little bit. And I don't want it to be that way. And I'm going to cover why after I give the score. I'm going to give this episode a 4 out of 10. So 4 out of 10. I just literally putting on the brakes on the momentum of the show to jump back 16 years to tell this story. And then also having such a lazy pacing, in my opinion. It just did not rush to anything until it needed to. And then it rushed through stuff that I wanted them to slow down on. So there you have it. I do want to talk a bit about the lesbian coven, which is what a lot of people are calling it online. It wasn't really obvious to me that they were 100% in some sort of a romantic relationship, unless I totally missed elements of it. Now, I know that the showrunners have talked about it. I think they confirmed that this was, in fact, the situation. But that's not what made the episode bad, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of things that made the episode bad. And one of them that stood out to me, and this is kind of where the turning point happened, is as we were watching it, there's a moment where they start singing a song. And there's like this chorus in the background, sort of, continuing to sing even after the moment happens when they're like doing their magic and trying to ascend the twins. And it was at that point where we both looked at each other and we're like, yeah, this isn't working. And so for us, it just wasn't great in that regard. But the lesbian gay storyline with these characters, I don't think it mattered whether they would have been together or not together. I honestly do not believe it would have affected the quality of the episode, because I know a lot of people would say, oh, woke this, woke that. Like, honestly, it just wasn't. I don't even think that they were respectful enough to really stick the landing on it. If you want me to be completely honest about it, like if you're going to go as far as to have like these two women together with these forced kids or whatever, if you're going to do that, then stick the landing and invest in it. Like, don't allude to it and then talk about it outside of the show. I just feel like that's a little silly. Anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. I'd love to hear whether you agree or disagree with anything I've said about this episode of The Acolyte. I'm still looking forward to the next episode. I hope we jump back into the present time chronologically for the show, and we don't look back at this. Like, if I watch this series on playback, I will skip this episode completely because there's nothing in it that I need to know. Once you've watched it and you understand it, you can just move on with it. That's where we are. So this week was kind of a nothing for me with Acolyte. Here's looking forward to next week.